political and world climate, between, Israel and Palestine and Hamas and Russia and Ukraine. I think the timing of something like this, of this book being converted into a movie couldn't be more perfect.
You're watching the Spotlight Network, starring Hollywood's newsman, Logan Crawford.
They now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we step into the tense, high-stakes world of military fiction with an amazing author. His name is John Sickles, and his gripping new thriller is called Peace on Earth at Any Cost. We meet Major Zeke Stone, a man surrounded by the weight of war and classified secrets in his cramped makeshift office, whose turbulent mind reflects the heavy responsibility of achieving global peace. Join us to explore what happens when an operative is forced to confront the dark sacrifices required to achieve the ultimate goal. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Prime 7 Media for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. John, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Logan. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you on the show. Given the title, Peace on Earth at Any Cost, what is the ultimate moral price Major Zeke Stone must pay for this peace?
Well, when I set out to write this book, it's really based upon the premise of, if you just look at the world in its current state of affairs, basically any country, there's hate, there's divisiveness, there's corruption, there's genocide. It's everywhere. We're fortunate to live in a free state, in the United States, and one of the best countries in the world. But 90% of the population doesn't live in our environment, and they face challenges every day that we don't face. And as you so eloquently put in the introduction about the book, it's really about Zeke, who suffers a devastating loss at the hands of terrorism. And, through that loss, he discovers his purpose. And his purpose is to attempt in some way, small or not, to bring some form of peace to the world. And he only knows one way of doing that. And that's, violence begets violence. And he sets out a mission to bring peace on earth his own way through his talents and his skills as a special operator. And, he works in those covert, dark circles that most of us don't ever hear about, but we see in the movies. Yeah. And there's a real world out there that exists just like that we are not privy to.
Absolutely. The military aspects of this book feel very real. Do you have a background in the military?
I don't, but I did a lot of research, and I have a lot of friends and family that have been in the military and law enforcement. So, research into the reality of how things work is always important.
Wonderful. Set the scene for the folks at home. What is the scenario that's the backdrop for this story?
It really starts in the opening scene. And I've had a lot of friends and family and early readers that have read the book so far, and their responses are like, "Oh my God, you had me in the first 4 chapters," and it's really about Zeke, who's talking to his family. They're on vacation. He's stationed overseas and he couldn't be with them, and they're taken from him instantly, and he has to watch it through a Zoom call, and his world's shattered. He's devastated. He eventually gets through that devastation and, gets through the 7 stages, and he gets kind of stuck on the stage of anger, in retaliation and retribution. And that's what really leads him over the next, months and years of his life to attempt to venge the loss that was taken from him so brutally. So that's really the backdrop that spurs all of his actions.
Absolutely. Those are the motivating factors behind his action. What is the peace being sought? Is it a global, lasting ceasefire or something more temporary and strategic?
Well, I think that's twofold for him. The piece is knowing that he's eliminated a terrible evil,
Mhm.
and the attempt to do that on a global stage, one terrible, corrupt leader at a time.
Yeah,
That's pretty much what his mission is. But
absolutely.
again, he has to operate in the dark, and so he's not a public figure. He doesn't publicize himself as to what he's doing. So, governments all around the world are trying to figure out who's doing this and what are their motivations.
Yeah. What was it like writing this and being immersed in that world?
The story's been on my mind for a long time.
Hmm.
And I'm sure there are millions of potential writers out there that felt like I did. So this story was in my mind for a good 4 or 5 years. And, I spend a lot of time in the professional financial markets, which is what my daytime career is. But that story was lingering. And what's funny is I actually sat through a master class that was conducted by James Patterson. He's one of my favorite
Hmm.
authors. And, he spelled out, if you want to be a writer, then be a writer.
Hmm.
And those are simple words, but, to put those in action and to get that thought from your head onto paper into a finished book, there's a lot that goes on. So I just made it a mission every morning to get up like an hour earlier than I usually would. And that's what I did for like the next 14, 15 months until it was done. And so now you've seen the finished product.
Wonderful. That James Patterson masterclass is a masterclass in masterclasses.
Oh, it is. It
Of all
is.
the classes I've taken on the masterclass programs, that one stands head and shoulders above the rest. And he really just gets down to brass tacks and explains exactly what you need to write a bestseller like he's done hundreds of times.
Oh yeah, and what I like about Patterson is, he's not this big flamboyant fluff ball. He just tells it how it is, and you're either
Yeah,
going to listen and follow or not. It doesn't make any difference to him one way or the other. But at the end of the day, you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
yeah.
You just do what works. And his writing style, his short chapters, his page turner action, that appeals to me, and I'm sure it appeals to millions of people, which is why he sells so many books. And I
Exactly.
wanted to put this book in that same format.
Absolutely. And you raise the stakes as he tells you to do in that book,
Yes,
as
yes.
in that class as well, by having high stakes in this book. I almost said movie. So let me ask you this. Have you envisioned it as a film?
Oh, absolutely. And fortunately for me, in the business that I'm in, I know several people in the Hollywood market
Mm.
that would be helpful in that arena. But I'm not ready to go there yet. Right now,
Yeah.
it's all about getting the exposure for the book, getting, the readership. But that is one thing I want to do. My next phase is to write book two because I want this to be a series. I really like this character. I think people are going to fall in love with him for many
Mhm.
reasons. Um, and, I want to expand his story. I've already got book two and book three ideas mapped out. I've already started the outlines for them, and I think those are going to be great follow-ups to this
Mhm.
first one. But yeah, definitely would love to turn this into a movie, especially in our current
Yeah.
political and world climate, between, Israel and Palestine and Hamas and Russia and Ukraine. I think the timing of something like this, of this book being converted into a movie couldn't be more perfect.
Yeah. Absolutely, I agree 100%. And it's got great characters, great settings, great locales, great conflicts. So I think it would be a terrific film. And you've put the work out there now, so you never know whose hands it's going to wind up in. And that's great. And it could be a series of films since it's going to be a series of books, which is, I think, terrific as well. If you could choose any actor from any time period at any age, who would play Major Stone? So you could pick.
You know, I was hoping you were going to ask me that question because I've thought about this over and over, and I can't. You know, I've thought of the demographics of who he has to be.
Yeah.
Because he spends a lot of time in the Middle East, so you got to be able to blend in. You've got to have dark hair and dark eyes and an olive skin complexion, and because he's got to fit in
Mhm.
everywhere he goes. And I haven't really. let's just say I haven't come up with a final idea on that person yet,
Yeah.
but I'm working on it.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, you could put out the casting call. I'm sure you'd get a lot of people
Yeah.
who'd love to play Major Stone. That's for sure. Where do you see the second and third installments going?
You know, I'm dabbling with the idea that Zeke gets pulled into the world of sex trafficking,
Hmm.
um, internationally. I mean, because in if you think about it, it's a form of terrorism. Okay.
Yeah.
It may not be, missiles and car bombs, but it affects tens of millions of lives across the world every day.
Mhm.
And I think he's going to get pulled into that direction in one book. And then, he's probably going to get pulled back domestically to some domestic terrorism that happens here just on the US soil. Um, as we hear periodically in the news, and I'm a firm believer in what we hear in the news is probably less than 5% of what's really going on out there that,
Yeah.
the FBI and the CIA and the NSA are combating on a daily basis. But domestic terrorism's on the rise as well.
Yeah.
Trump was attempted to be shot, and he was, that shooter was, influenced. And then we have Charlie Kirk that, just passed away from an
Mhm.
assassination. So, when's it going to stop?
I don't
And
know.
what drastic and radical action has to take place to put it in perspective for everybody and bring some form of peace?
Yeah, I absolutely feel that we're living in the most violent chapter in human history ever. I mean, with the mass shootings that take place every day, the political assassinations, school shootings, church fires, terrorism, it's unbelievable. Like you said, right now, a lot of it's domestic and it's really, really frightening. I don't know. I don't know how you stop it. I guess you get proactive, and I guess you have to push aside the Constitution a little bit, and you have to get these actors before they act because so much of our policing is reactive rather than proactive. What are your thoughts? How do we achieve peace on earth?
Well, I don't think you can do it by staying in the lines personally. I think that, we've formed this form of our sense of justice in the United States and how justice has to be served.
Mhm.
But the bad guys don't care about that. They don't
Yeah,
have any rules.
yeah,
Okay. And unless you can break and bend those rules and color outside the lines, you can't get radical change in the state of affairs. You just can't do it.
yeah.
And so that's why I wrote this book that, maybe the solution is something nobody wants to talk about, but what really has to be done.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. We have to, cut through the garbage, the politically correct nonsense of screening 78-year-old ladies at the airport. Look for young war age men and
Right.
screen them diligently and so forth. I mean, our hands, the law enforcement's hands are tied because they're told to treat everyone as an equal threat. Not everyone is an equal threat. Sorry.
Yes.
That's the reality of life in 2025. Give you the final word before we leave you today. What do you hope folks at home take away from your work, from your book?
That there might be a better future tomorrow, but we've got to act today, and we all have to be vigilant. We all have to do our part. So many people in this country, they don't want to get involved. I mean, from watching a domestic violence situation where nobody wants to get involved, they don't want their name in, and they'll watch and witness terrible things happening, and don't take action. What's funny is there's that show out there, What Would You Do?
Yeah,
um, the new shows, and I watch that once in a while, and I watch how people react in situations. And 50% of the time, the people step up and do the right thing, and 50% of the time, people don't do anything.
yeah,
And it's the when you don't do anything, you encourage the bad acts, and when you don't get involved. And sure, it's about personal risk, it's about your own safety, but when we're focused on just our own safety in our own world, the entire world globally suffers.
agreed.
And I think, if once you read the book and you understand Zeke's mission and his purpose and where it comes from, it might inspire people to react differently to everyday situations.
Absolutely. Hopefully, when a little girl has her throat slashed on a Charlotte rapid transit train, they won't sit there looking at their phones while she bleeds out.
Yeah,
Maybe
exactly.
they'll take some action. Yeah, without a doubt. The name of the book is Peace on Earth at Any Cost, and John Sickles delivers a gripping military thriller that forces readers to question the true price of security and global stability. John, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Logan.
I appreciate your time, your insight, and wonderful work on this book and the forthcoming books as well. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford for the Spotlight Network. So long for now.